Shabbat Shalom. Start off with a little story, not my own story, but so this past week, Zach, my husband, got back from a singing and meditation retreat that he was on in Florida, which I was excited to hear about. And it was a Jewish retreat, but it was actually at the Franciscan Center, and so it was a Catholic retreat center. And while he was there, Zach connected with one of the priests, one of the fathers, and he was eager to speak with Zach and to have that kind of cross-religious and cross-cultural connection. And he was even more excited to find out that Zach was a musician and composer because he had written, he writes some lyrics himself, and he told Zach, I wrote the lyrics to this song, but I never set them to music. And meeting you, maybe this is time to set them to music. It's actually a song that he was inspired by the Jewish community's resilience to anti-Semitism and was inspired to write this poem to be set to music. So Zach was like, okay, I'd be happy to hear it. Give me the lyrics. And he comes back to his room later, and there's a little note with his name on it, and he opens it up. And he realized he couldn't do it. He wasn't going to be able to set this song to music because he looked at the title and it was, "Don't Let the Light Go Out." Okay? So I don't know if he didn't have the heart to tell the priest that we already have our famous Hanukkah anthem by Peter, Paul, and Mary with that exact title. The way he told me, no one will ever be able to set this to music because you really can't think anything other than "Don't let the light go out," right? For so many years. So I don't think we're going to be hearing that song anytime soon. But it was really interesting for me that even for this Catholic priest who doesn't know his, folksy Hanukkah songs, that the resilience of the Jewish people stood out for him as a source of inspiration, right? And that even though sometimes it can feel a little cliche that this metaphor of light in the face of darkness really has stuck with us as a powerful metaphor for resilience throughout our history. And so I was thinking about that reading this week's Parsha because we encounter the plague of darkness. And after 8 plagues that have ravaged the land, the crops, the animals, even the bodies of the Egyptians, I think we can imagine a little bit of how they might have felt, right? Exhausted, terrified, desperate. And then we have this plague of darkness, which seems somehow different from the other plagues, and also somehow different from our usual understanding of a typical darkness, of just the absence of light in a room or a space. And the whole plague is very short, only 3 verses really. God said to Moshe, "Hold your arm toward the sky and let there be darkness upon the land of Egypt, a darkness that can be touched." Moshe held out his arm toward the sky, and thick darkness descended upon all the land of Egypt for 3 days. People could not see one another, and for 3 days, no one could rise from where they were. But all the Israelites had light in their dwellings. This was not an ordinary darkness. The Torah describes it as bayamesh choshech, a darkness that could be touched, could be felt. And Ibn Ezra explains that it was so thick that the people could touch it, and no fire, no candle could pierce it. The Torah then says, "Velo kamu ish mitachtav," no person arose from where they were. Okay, that doesn't happen to us in a regular dark night. According to the Midrash, if someone was sitting, they wouldn't be able to stand. If someone was lying down, they wouldn't even be able to sit up. It was a darkness that was tangible, heavy, paralyzing. And the commentary in our Etz Chaim Chumash, someone was just sharing with me today, they really like the commentary in the Etz Chaim at Leah. And yeah, I really found it insightful this week. It says, perhaps the plague was not a physical darkness. Perhaps it was a spiritual or psychological darkness, a deep depression. Perhaps the Egyptians were depressed by the series of calamities that had struck them, or by the realization of how much their own comfort depended on the enslavement of others. The person who cannot see his neighbor is incapable of spiritual growth, incapable of rising from where he is currently. So in this view, darkness is not only a plague sent by God, in addition to the other plagues, but kind of a natural progression of the suffering that the Egyptians had been experiencing throughout the plagues, and maybe also this growing awareness of the suffering present in their society. I have to say that this description of darkness as this heavy and overwhelming and immobilizing force unfortunately feels very relatable right now. We're in a time of fear, and the news cycles are moving rapidly through so many stories of suffering and loss and injustice. And what I'm feeling and what I've been hearing from others is just how overwhelming that is. Concern bordering on despair, even numbness. And yet within that space of darkness, there's another moment where this Parsha offers us a way forward and a different way of relating to darkness. The Netivot Shalom, the Torah commentary of the Slonim Rabbi, so a Hasidic commentary, offers this powerful teaching about darkness in his commentary on Parshat Bo. But it's not in reference to the plague. It's actually focusing on the moment later on where God gives us the mitzvah of Rosh Chodesh. That happens in this Parsha. It's going to be the beginning of Nisan, the night of darkness, no moon, and God says this will be the first of the months. God gives us that calendar that revolves around the cycles of the moon. And so the Slonim Rebbe asks, why does the Jewish calendar follow the moon instead of the sun? We actually kind of follow both, but with Rosh Chodesh, we mostly surround ourselves with the moon and its cycles. And here's what he says. The moon has times when it is in the peak of darkness, and we don't see even a spark of its light. But even in that peak of darkness, we know that it will begin to shine again as it was before and return to its fullness. So too is the life of Israel, following the example of the moon. The way of life of the people of Israel is full of times of darkness and shadow, suffering, and many troubles. But Israel count time by the moon, and even in the peak of darkness, we know that it will certainly return to illuminate as it had before. We learn that from the moon's cycles, how to maintain hope even in dark times. He adds another layer to it. The sun only shines during the day, but the moon can be seen during the night or the day. Other nations, he says, worship the sun, and they only serve their God when things are going well for them. That is, metaphorically, when the sun is shining. But Jews keep time by the moon, which can be seen both when it's light out and when it's dark, meaning that Jews serve God both when things are going well for us and when things are not going well. So we don't, I think, need to line this up along the lines of Jews and other peoples, but the teaching is the same. It's a Jewish value to be consistent in our acts of service, whether the sun is shining or whether it feels as dark as a moonless night. Serving God, to bring more holiness into the world through mitzvot, including by taking care of each other and taking care of those who are most vulnerable. If you, like me, are feeling overwhelmed by the suffering and the fear, if it brings you into that state of darkness and of paralysis, I encourage you to find one mitzvah, one action that you can take, maybe one way to get involved and make it your point of light, your sliver of new moon. Maybe it's one of our social justice committees or another organization. Last week, our speaker for Racial Justice Shabbat, Jillian Harvey, spoke about having conversations with people who are different from us and connecting with the people around us and getting to know our neighbors. That can be a point of light. So this plague of darkness, it teaches us what happens, or it reflects maybe something we already know about what happens when we become so overwhelmed that we shut down. But this mitzvah of Rosh Chodesh reminds us that even in the darkest times, the light will return. And in the meantime, we focus on doing what we can. So may we all find within ourselves that sense of purpose that can carry us through the many cycles of dark and light. Shabbat Shalom.